Okay, everyone, I am about to admit persons onto the call and we will begin streaming. So we will start at roughly, I'll say maybe 5 past, just to allow persons onto the call.
Hi. Hi.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi. 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 Hello. Hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. We will be starting shortly at about 5 minutes past 12 to allow everyone into the call.
Yeah.
So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chelsea Foster, the founder and executive director of Girls of a Feather St. Lucia. Welcome and thank you for joining our live webinar under the theme of e-counseling, digitizing mental health care in the Caribbean, organized by Eutelmed and Girls of a Feather with the support and partnership from UNICEF and the OECS Commission. To celebrate International Youth Day today, we want to acknowledge the work of mental health advocates in the region who are challenging our leaders, taking ownership of the conversation, and taking the necessary steps to ensure and demand collective action when it comes to the psychological well-being of youth. On average, the Caribbean spends only 4.3% of its healthcare budget on mental health. There is still a heightened sense of shame when talking about mental illness and lack of education and access to services. One of the ways that we have learned to adapt to our current reality in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic is by leveraging the internet and mobile technology to improve accessibility and mental health support. Earlier this year, Girls of a Feather also launched our first free telehealth platform and website offering crisis counseling, therapy, and sexual and reproductive health consultations to women and girls between 16 to 35 in St. Lucia. Today, we are excited to have been able to partner with Eutelmed to now transfer our therapists onto their platform to increase the amenities available to our clients. At this time, I'd like to introduce Ms. Heather Stewart, Child Protection Specialist with the UNICEF Office for the Eastern Caribbean, and Ms. Anik Kaitesi Jozan, Clinical Psychologist and Project Manager for Eutelmed, to share some brief remarks on the psychosocial program, which was also supported by the United States Agency for International Development, USAID.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Chelsea. Our hosts, Girls of a Feather, our current partners, Eutelmed and the OECS Commission, our panelists, our audience. Today, in celebration of International Youth Day, UNICEF joins with you in shining a spotlight on a challenge that is all too common, ensuring access to mental health services for all. This has been a challenge that affects communities, workplaces, families, and young people. And it has become a particular challenge with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. The UNICEF Office for the Eastern Caribbean area is committed to providing help to those who need it and in creating a safe environment in which people are comfortable reaching for that help with care, with respect, without discrimination. With the initial funding support of USAID, technical support of PAHO, and in partnership with the OECS Commission, UNICEF recruited Eutelmed, an international company, to provide a free 24-hour multilingual e-counseling service that is accessible to the entire population of the Eastern Caribbean region. We are pleased to welcome Girls of a Feather to the partnership. We thank them for organizing this webinar, as well as the audience and you, the audience, for your participation. Increased use of technology in the provision of services is here to stay. But how can we increase this networking opportunity? How can adolescents and young people have improved connections to such services? How can we build a safe and respectful social culture in which mental health is readily accessible for all in this region? UNICEF looks forward to this discussion today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you, everyone who's attending this webinar. I'll just take short time to present Eutelmed. So Eutelmed, our motto is caring for everyone, everywhere. And this is since 2010. We are dedicated to the prevention of psychosocial risks and the enhancement of work-life quality. We work all over the world. And this is thanks to the collaboration of multicultural and experienced mental health professionals. And now we're really happy to have psychologists from the Caribbean as well. We have 4 main areas of intervention: is mental health and wellness preservation, crisis management, competency development, and psychosocial audits. Now, why we choose to propose any counseling service? First, there is a context. Sometimes we just can't attend a professional. Now it's in this project, it's the COVID-19 crisis, which is proving to be a crisis as well for mental health, especially for youth. There is a challenge. The challenge for us is to propose the right information about mental health risks. The second challenge, that may be even the first, is fight the stigma around it. And the third is to make available a tailored service to ensure accessibility, flexibility, confidentiality, and give every opportunity to preserve the emotional health of everyone in need. So Eutelmed has innovated to meet these challenges, because it is, for us, it was, and it still is, crucial to set up and maintain a solid and reliable services capable of providing immediate, free, anyone who's connecting in our platform with the UNICEF code doesn't have to pay anything, it's free. And it gets a personalized mental health support and follow-up. I will have a chance to present how this works, but what I want to say, which is really important to us, there are 3 key words. It's secured. Your informations are secured. It's confidential, and it's professional. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather and Anik. Taking over now for our panel discussion is Ms. Desil Diane Francis, our Youth for Gender Equality Ambassador with Girls of a Feather, who will be moderating today's discussion.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Our first panelist, Donnell Cleary, is a St. Lucia news correspondent and a published author of 2 books, My Spoken Word Journey, and the second, an autobiography, My Life, My Journey, My Survival. In his life, he has survived 3 suicide attempts, which later on led him to found the Mental Health Awareness Foundation, which is SAVE, and it stands for Suicide Awareness Voices for Education. The organization seeks to end mental health stigma and serves as a support to people going through psychological challenges, as well as people affected by suicide. His hope is that his experiences can be used as a testimony to help save lives. Our second panelist, Chanel C. Imhoff, is an Antiguan young entrepreneur, communication specialist, and mental health activist. She has recently been selected as a participant in the 2022 Young Leaders of the Americas Initiative. As a mental health advocate, Imhoff is the author of the Mental Health and Campaign Finance Reform Bills in the National Youth Parliament of Antigua and Barbuda, and works closely with the Clearview Psychiatric Hospital in fundraising and awareness campaigns for mental health. She is also the Public Relations Officer for the Caribbean Women in Leadership Antigua and Barbuda National Chapter, and the former Public Relations Officer at the Whalings Nature Reserve. Our third panelist and Barbadian, Trey Cumberbatch, is the founder of a youth mental health literacy program called Talk to Me, a developer of an online app prototype to mobilize more investment in mental health services in the Caribbean. As a full-time mental health advocate, Trey strives to eradicate the stigma surrounding mental illness and to promote positive mental health among Caribbean youth. These ambitions are the result of his distinct love for psychology and his own experiences with anxiety and depression because of his mother's untimely passing in 2013. Trey is also the 2021 Commonwealth Caribbean Rhodes Scholar and will begin his studies in psychology in September. On this basis, He hopes to develop a holistic understanding of mental disorders and the treatment. Our final panelist from Trinidad and Tobago, Camille M. Quamina, is a private practice clinical psychologist in Trinidad and Tobago. She's a member of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists and the France-based Eutelmed e-consultation network of healthcare providers. She's also a specialized, she also has a specialized postgraduate training in understanding trauma. She works easily with adults and adolescents through the provision of psychotherapy, employee assistance programs to small and medium businesses, and various mental health workshops, lectures, and discussions. She is committed to providing the highest quality of care to promote healing and growth through a unique combination of psychological, philosophical, and spiritual tenets that can help people navigate through the complex world in order to live a healthier, happier life. Okay, so since the outbreak of COVID-19, we've seen a decrease in the mental well-being of persons, resulting in the increase in anxiety, depression, stress, loneliness, and abuse for marginalized youth, such as those from the LGBTQIA+ community, youth with disabilities, girls as well as boys. Their responses to and the impact of these challenges have varied, which leads me to ask the first question. What is the state of mental health care among youth you serve or represent in your country, and the challenges to them accessing services? So we're gonna start off with Donnell, we're gonna go off to Chanel, and we're gonna end with Camille with this one. And of course, let's not forget Trey. So after Chanel, we're gonna go with Trey and end with Camille. Sorry about that.
Donnell, we need to unmute your mic. Great, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. I think mental health care services here in St. Lucia, especially for everyone, is very limited, because right now we only have one healthcare facility here in St. Lucia. And during the COVID crisis, I think like right now, it is limited to only, if you call for an appointment, you can go to the wellness center now. Personally, I would say that there is so much more to be done when it comes to mental health care in St. Lucia, because being affected by depression myself, it's been a challenge, especially to access the wellness center, because right now they will actually, if you like before you would call and you will just walk in, but now you have to call to make an appointment, and therefore if you wish to see a counselor, now you will have to wait until they give you the appointment so you can walk in. So that itself can be a major challenge to persons who need the psychological help right now. Another challenge is location, because persons from the south of the island who wish to access mental health care service, because of people I encounter right now, the biggest challenge is that they cannot find transportation or bus fares to travel from Vieux-Fort to Castries, and that itself can be a big challenge. And because of my foundation right now, I reach out to them, I offer assistance in whatever way I can. My foundation is there to ending stigma and helping persons with depression, and just being as a resource to persons suffering with mental health care.
Thank you so much, Donnell. We can go ahead, Chanel.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. So in Antigua and Barbuda, our last updated legislation when it comes to mental health was actually 1957. So that alone should tell you where we are in terms of access to healthcare. Our main hospital, our only hospital, the Sir Lester Bird Mount St. John Medical Center, does not have a psychiatric ward. And we have one psychiatric hospital, which is the Clearview Psychiatric Hospital. Now, having been through the process myself, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety in 2019. And that process, just to get that diagnosis, probably compounded my issues. Because the process is you can't just go and do a walk-in at Clearview, you can't just go and access services. What you have to do is you actually have to go to the hospital, go to the ER, explain what you're feeling, wait for a little while. I actually waited in the asthma bay for so long. I made a friend named Tyrone, God rest his soul, he passed the other day. Wait there for a little while, then get, see a doctor, explain yourself to maybe 3 or 4 different persons, and then from that they decide, what they're going to do. They're going to refer to Clearview, and this is after you would have done a bunch of blood work as well to medically clear you from anything. So there's no public instant access to anything that's mental health related. Our community clinics as well are not equipped to deal with mental health emergencies. So if you are living on the south side of the island, which is considered a bit far, Antigua is very small, but some places are still considered a bit far, and you're having a mental health emergency, your best bet is to probably call an ambulance or get yourself to the main hospital because there's no actual service being provided within our communities that deal with mental health. From a government perspective, there is the Social Services Board, which is a pretty recent kind of development, and it's still working out certain kinks, but you can have access, but the access is very limited. I would have made appointments for a few persons who I was working along with, and you call today and they say, okay, we can get you somebody in 2 weeks. And most of us here, we know that when you're having a mental health emergency, especially, 2 weeks can be 2 weeks too much, right? So that's where we are in terms of our access. Currently, I'm working along with a working group that is trying to establish the Antigua Barbuda Mental Health Counselors, Association of Mental Health Counselors, to at least regularize that and to give persons some sort of idea who they can go to, some sort of price point. But that as well is a bit of a barrier, because from what I've seen for a lot of persons, finance is usually a big trigger. And we have a inside joke, me and my friends, who say, boy, we can't even afford to have a mental health crisis because we can't afford a first visit, which ranges anywhere from $300 to $500 easy dollars sometimes. So it's very difficult, in a sense, to access mental health services until after. We don't have a lot of prevention and mitigation going on, but there's access after something terrible has happened to you, or you've done something terrible to someone else. In terms of access, we are sort of still very behind because of the type of legislation we have. It doesn't focus on the institutionalization or anything like that. It's very archaic, and it focuses on punishment and incarceration as opposed to identifying the rights of persons with mental health emergencies and mental illnesses. So we are very much in need of a modernized and streamlined mental health care system here.
Thank you so much, Chanel. And it seems to be that Antigua and St. Lucia, we have that common theme of archaic rules and archaic ways of treating mental illnesses. Thank you so much. Trey, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So to answer the initial question in terms of the state of mental health among Barbadian youth, it is something that definitely needs to be addressed urgently. Even recently, at the beginning of this year, we did have some young persons taking their lives. And when I say young, I'm talking persons that are 17 and 19 years old, like these very, very young persons, which is tragic, which will always be tragic. And I will always maintain, much like what Chanel was saying just now, is this very reactive response that we have to mental health and mental illness. Like, we wait until something happens to begin to have the conversations, like, okay, like, we need to do this and we need to do that. But you need to be having those conversations so that persons don't get to that point in the first place. In terms of the access of the services, I will say that what really prevents a lot of young people, because we do have services here in Barbados, but there's a lack of awareness surrounding the services. Nobody knows the procedure in terms of, okay, if I want to access a therapist, how do we do that? If I want to get a diagnosis, how do we do that? Even as far as the availability of free services, because cost is another barrier. In most instances, if you want to go to a private practitioner, therapy is unfortunately expensive in most instances. And even in conversations I've had with persons my age, talking to them and trying to, I guess, pitch therapy to them, the thing they would say is that, like, Trey, I would love to do therapy, but I cannot afford therapy right now. And then that is linked back to the situation of unemployment and unfortunately what the pandemic has done to economies. So lastly, I will always say that in terms of not just the availability of services, but the availability of youth-specific services, I will always argue that, like, young people are a very special demographic when it comes to mental health. We have our own special needs, but I guess you guys can confirm if it's the case in your countries, but I know in Barbados for sure, there's still this view that, like, oh, you young, you don't pay the bills, you don't got the children, so, like, what you got to be worried or depressed about. And that right there, that prevents a lot of people from speaking out. And I always say, for any time someone does not speak out, then they cannot get the help that they need. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Trey. And I really loved your point of youth-specific services. This is really important, and it has been put on the back burner for so long. Thank you for that. Camille?
Hi, everyone. I think in Trinidad and Tobago, we find ourselves in some interesting loops. It's difficult to say, so this is one loop. It's difficult to say the impact on youth, and that's because there's not a lot of research done in that area. So we know from international studies and, review of the literature that there are some factors that are heavily impacted by the status of the population's mental health. Things like committing offenses and then, recommitting an offense. So how many times are we in the jail, essentially? Things like absenteeism from work, productivity at work, all of those things are impacted by mental health, by the status of your mental health, and not a lot of research has gone directly to say, well, yes, this is what we've observed in Trinidad. We can link this to this, Trinidad and Tobago, etc., etc. So I think that is a part of the problem, which is that there's not a lot of importance being put on that type of research for us to have some real figures, even though we know how important mental health is. And I think we find ourselves also in another loop where in Trinidad and Tobago, we do have a lot of social programs. So we have a lot of access to a lot of mental health social programs that are provided for free by the government. And I think what ends up happening is, and this could potentially be a regional factor, is that we're sort of a new nation. We come, and most of the islands in the Caribbean come from a line of oppression. And from the moment you're dealing with people who have been oppressed, you're dealing with people who are in survival mode. And if I'm in survival mode, I'm not studying, what's the fancy steak I can have today to eat? I'm thinking, where can I get a loaf of bread for how cheap I can get a loaf of bread? And the same thing applies to your emotional body. That applies to your physical body. So when you're dealing with oppressed people, they're in survival mode in their emotional body, and there's no importance on how I feel, what matters. There's an importance on making it through the day and being able to provide. And within our region, we are relatively all celebrating about the same amount of years independence, which is relatively small compared to some of the other countries in the world, right? So that oppression is still very fresh, I think, and it contributes to a lot of stigma towards the mental health, which contributes to people not giving it very much importance and thus not accessing programs or being afraid to walk into a hospital and say, this is what I'm looking for that judgment factor. So I think in Trinidad and Tobago, those are the kind of cycles that we find ourselves in when it pertains to mental health. Oh, I think you're muted. Diane, I think you're muted, so we can't hear you.
Thank you so much. I was just saying that I really liked how you linked oppression to how people don't pay attention to these kinds of social services. And what really stood out to me is the lack of research in these areas. So it sort of gives our governments an excuse. So what are the facts? There's no fact to support the need for that. So the lack of research in that area is really important. Well, we can go on to our second question. In St. Lucia, we've established a mental wellness center. However, our youth outpatient clinic is not currently operational, and the mental health policy and mental health act drafted in 2007 or 2008 thereabout has not yet come into force. In response to this, we've seen local NGOs increasing the number of public awareness campaigns on mental health. So my question to you is, what are some of the ways you are working on addressing stigma and access to resources in your country? So we can start off with Trey, and then we can go on to anyone else who wants to respond to the question.
Hey, so I always tell people that I talk a lot. So I guess like my main method of advocacy is using my voice and being willing to present my story. I always say that, like, as an advocate, like, your story is one of the most powerful things that you can use, because at the end of the day, it no longer just becomes like, this is something arbitrary the person is talking about. Like, this person has lived this experience, so this person knows what it is like and what that does for other people, which is why I loved when Donnell, his bio was being read, how he said that he wants his story to be a testimony to inspire people. I think that is extremely powerful. So for me, I'm always willing to share my story. I'm always looking for spaces like these and beyond to really share that story and emphasize the importance of mental health awareness. I actually launched an Instagram page last year called Talk to Me, and we were sharing information and myths versus facts on mental health. Unfortunately, that has not been active for a while, but life has just happened, to be honest. I'm going to get back on track one of these days. And 2019, I actually developed an app prototype at a congress that would help with that, in terms of like collecting young people's stories and then presenting them to governments so that we could begin to get things like mental health policies and actual action coming into play. So that's been what I've been doing from my end.
Very good. Like, that's really impressive. Anyone else? You can go ahead. Donnell, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, as for me, I've been using my personal story since I survived 3 suicide attempts. So I've been using my story to raise awareness on mental health and depression in St. Lucia. I also launched an organization called Safe Suicide Awareness Voices for Education. And what I do is that I reach out to persons with psychological issues. I recently spoke to my parliamentary rep so that we can at least look to see if we can put mental health in the health agenda. So we're supposed to meet anytime soon so we can discuss that. I also use my body while I wear t-shirts with messages on mental health and different things. And I think that when I walk in town, it draws attention where persons, it's different. So persons can at least know that it's okay to speak about mental health, and they're not the only ones going through it. I feel like when you talk about it, persons can relate to it and feel like it's okay to speak up and seek the help that they need. I also look forward to, when school reopen, I look forward to going to different schools around St. Lucia to speak on mental health and use my story. I also wrote a book, my second book, called my life, my journey, my survival, it's a lot on mental health and my personal story. So I wrote in there basically a journal on different mental health stories, my suicide attempts, how to speak up on suicide, how to tell people they're suicidal, the help available. I also wrote a journal at the back where persons can write and learn more about themselves and about their moods and different things. So yeah.
Nice, nice. I really like that. I really love the fact that both you and Trey spoke about using your voice, and that's so super important because it makes it relatable. And also worrying and speaking about mental health issues online, especially, it sort of removes the social taboo around talking about your issues and your feelings. So I really love that, and continue using your voice.
Thank
Anyone
you.
else? Camille, you're welcome.
I think the career that I've chosen to even be a psychologist is because I think your emotional body is so important, and it really, there is a real mind body connection, and taking care of your emotional body can impact your physical body also, and it can really change your entire way of living. It's the reason that I chose to become a psychologist, and I try to spread that message. If persons need that individual one-on-one work, that's what I do. That's my day-to-day job. I also have a online presence, so you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I have a website where I try to put articles out there on different mental health topics. Every day I post on my social media accounts little bits of information that can be helpful, that can start you thinking a little bit. You can incorporate some of those things in your life, and it just sort of is kind of like dipping your toe in the water a little bit, just stepping out a little bit, see what it feels like. And I always try to emphasize, if it doesn't make sense, it's okay to need to go in for a therapy session or to start that process so that you can explore a little bit more. So I guess echoing everybody else and trying to put that information out there so that people can get acquainted to it a little bit, because that's where it starts, really.
Great, thank you so much. I'm not sure if Shani wants to speak a bit on that.
Yes, I did, but I happen to live next to the airport, and British Airways decided to make an arrival as soon as I was going to unmute my mic. So for us here, besides putting together the Mental Health Act for the National Youth Parliament, we have been trying to bring together psychologists, psychiatrists, anybody in the mental health field, advocates as well, into one organization, because we don't have anything like that here, even to regulate pricing and services, etc. So we've been working on that through the Mental Health Counselors Association, as well as trying to engage with the Ministry of Health and Wellness to see how we can adapt certain aspects of that bill and get the current mental health legislation either repealed and replaced or amended and modernized. Because even in that legislation, we still have bipolar disorder being referred to as manic depressive disorder. It's so backwards. Yes, so we've been trying to do that. Having these conversations online, as well as somebody said earlier, is very important. So being a part of fora like this through our work in other organizations, whether it be, CWIL or the Guild of Students at the University of the West Indies, I'm a student at, we try to use all the platforms that we have in order to underscore the importance of talking about it and removing that stigma, because that, outside of finance, outside of legislation, outside of a lot of things, that is one of the biggest barriers to accessing any sort of mental health care, because nobody wants to be looked at as crazy.
Love that. I really like the fact that you working so hard on policy. Awareness is one thing, advocacy is one thing, but the policy, that's where the sort of real change comes in.
Yeah.
Because that's where finance comes in. That's where people, the whole population sort of gets to know and share their experiences. So I really love that. We can move on to thank you so much everyone for answering. Our third question, oh, actually, if anyone in the audience has any questions or anything, you can drop it in the chat. We will be addressing it towards the end of this webinar. So onto the third question. With the onset of the pandemic causing a shift towards online services, how do you see telehealth services such as Eutelmed benefiting more young people in the Caribbean? So that's, it's open, it's an open question, anyone can answer.
I think it can be really beneficial because access is super important. And I mean, for example, in Trinidad and Tobago, what I have noticed is that there, it's difficult, I guess, because of the stigma, and I guess the stigma applies throughout the region on mental health services. So being able to not have to step out and go into a building or go into a hospital and say, and you have that element of confidentiality and privacy from the comfort of your home, from your car, from your bedroom, from your office, it allows you to dabble, to experiment a little bit. Well, let me see what this process is like and put myself out there, see what it's like, and then it can empower people to really have that confidence to be able to step into a hospital and say, well, this is what is going on, I need this help. So I think in terms of the access and allowing people to see what it's like in a very confidential way can be challenging to that. Ultimately, it can be challenging to the stigma that's attached to, taking care of your mental health.
Thank you so much for that, Camille. Does anyone else want to share their thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Just add.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just adding to what Camille said, I think it would be very beneficial in the region and province of Lucia because of the stigma attached to mental health. Because most persons I get in contact with, the main issue is that going to seek mental health care services at the facility. Most of them are interested in e-counseling. I think I have to do with the stigma attached to mental health. So, for example, if someone will go to the wellness center for counseling, they're afraid that persons might see them. They might be called crazy. They might be labeled as a mad person. So it would be beneficial a lot.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
I
Thank you for
definitely.
comment. Oh, you can go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, thanks. I definitely concur with helping the stigma and also making persons more comfortable because your mental health professional can only help you as far as you're honest with them. And if you're not comfortable, you're not going to be, completely honest. And I can tell you I think it was 2019, I was hospitalized. I was at the bed near to the door, and I always kept my curtains drawn because people like to pass people into the rooms, and I was already having a terrible time, and I'm like, I'm not about that. So I had my curtains drawn, and the comments made by the nurses were they were trying to debate which one of them was going to deal with the crazy girl on the ward. So when you're met with comments like that from persons who are supposed to be professionals, of course, you're going to have a lot of trepidation when it comes to actually trying to get, help. So this platform, I think, would be super beneficial for a lot of persons, especially the ones like us who overthink. Because I think and then I overthink my thoughts. And I'm like, am I thinking too much? And everything just goes and spirals. But then when you have this sort of comfortable environment where we're able to be honest and you're able to, let persons know what's really going on, you can get the help that you need.
Yeah, very true. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, before I give my point, Chanel, I just want to say two things. One, I completely feel you on overthinking the thoughts. Like it is possible to be an overthinker times two. I can confirm that. But on a more serious note, though, I am sorry though that was your experience in terms of persons making those kind of comments about you. And I do think moving forward, I think that needs to be a thing region-wide where we have sensitivity training for medical professionals and staff in terms of dealing with persons and where they're at. To answer the question, I do think Camille had mentioned the whole point of comfort, like being able to access the service in the comfort of your own home, like that goes a long way, because then it's like therapy is a huge step, and you want to be as comfortable as possible when you're making that step. So being in your bedroom environment where you feel like you're in control of your environment, that could go such a long way. And it's also quite convenient too. Like you don't have to worry about things like traveling, like how you're going to get to the medical center, that kind of thing. And in terms of Eutelmed specifically, they also have a, well, I guess this will come up in the demonstration, but there's also like a 24/7 feature. And I think that is so handy because mental health and mental illness, it doesn't operate on a clock. It's not like oh, I will be here at 3 p.m. when it is convenient for you. Sometimes, like in my personal experience, I've had instances where like I wake up early in the morning and like all of my thoughts are attacking me at that time. And then it's like, I don't have anyone that I could like message that would be up, like, are you up? I need someone to talk to right now. So I think for a lot of young people who have that similar experience, it would be very handy for them to be able to have something that they can lean on at these inconvenient hours.
Yeah, very true. The comfort is one of the most important parts of this because there's such a stigma already. Imagine going and everybody's watching you. So comfort is definitely a big factor to that. So Camille, we'd like to direct this last question to you as one of the therapists on Eutelmed. What are some common misconceptions about therapy? What should clients expect when using the platform, and when should persons seek help?
I think I like to equate mental health to physical health because I think it makes it a little bit easier. So, if you feel a little bit physically unwell, you have a little ache somewhere, you have a headache for a little bit, you're going to go into the doctor essentially and check it out. The doctor may say, well, this could be what's going on. This is what I advise you do. Lay off the computer, or you need to get glasses, or whatever it may be. I think therapy is really that process where you're doing that, but for your emotional health. So I'm not feeling 100, or I'm feeling fine and I want to do a check-in and make sure that everything is still okay. So the when do I do it, I think there is no right time. You can check in, just like with your physical health. At any time that you want to, you can do a brief check-in, a one-off session. You can start a long-term process if there's a lot more disruption in your day-to-day functioning. So we function on different domains in our life. We have school, you have a job, you have your family life, you have your friendship, social life. And if you find that there are disruptions in those domains, so I'm unable to go out with my friends, I can't focus and concentrate in school, the more disruptions that you have equated to your physical health, consider it the more physical symptoms that you have that would sort of push you into going to the doctor. Then you may want to come into a mental health professional to kind of talk a little bit, see what's going on. I think a lot of times we can think our thoughts and our feelings are inescapable and they are a definite who we are. That's not so. There are factors that affect our thoughts and feelings, unconscious factors like our genes, our genetic makeup, in the same way that your genes affect your physical health. And sometimes you may need to go into the doctor and get, some vitamins. You may have a deficiency, you need to top up on your vitamin C. And so you go, you take your medication, your mental health works and your emotional body works in the exact same way. So sometimes due to genes, you may not be producing as much serotonin or not be able to uptake as much serotonin as is needed. And serotonin is something that helps you have a good mood. So then you have a biochemical intervention where you may be required to take some medication, or sometimes that intervention can come about through talk therapy, where we change, the way that a person approaches certain situations and circumstances, and that can help, rewire the body essentially. So I think the when, of course, the more disruptions that you're having in your day-to-day functioning is the more that you want to come in across those domains. But I think at any time you feel to do a check-in is okay. Treat it like your physical health. I think it's important, though, to know that you can use therapy in different ways. So it can be a long-term process where there is a deep exploration of yourself, your unconscious assumptions, the lens through which you really would explore it and re-challenge the things that aren't working for you. Or you can use it for specific problems. So I have a one-off, situation coming up and we need some extra help, some coping tips. So it's so, I guess, interesting and dynamic that it can work in any way that you want it to. I think the important thing to know with therapy is to consider yourself having two bodies. Consider yourself having a physical body and an emotional body. Therapy is that process whereby you check in on that emotional body and you make sure it's also, up to par exactly as you would with your physical body and your doctors and your vitamins and your exercise and all of the things we do to take care of our physical health. Therapy is that process. You take care of your mental health.
Thank you so much, Camille. Chelsea?
I see Trey has his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to Camille, thank you for that, what she just outlined, especially when she touched on the point of your not your thoughts. I can admit on a very personal level, I've been really struggling a lot with my thoughts lately, and I started to fall into that trap of thinking oh my gosh, maybe it's me, or maybe this is all I will ever be. And it gets tough sometimes, I'm not gonna lie. I always tell people that your thoughts are some of the hardest things you can fight. So I just wanted to thank Camille for that reminder, just reminding us that we are not our thoughts and that our thoughts can be changed.
Amazing. I just want to thank every one of our panelists, everyone who logged in to watch. I just want to thank you so much, and thank you to our panelists especially for sharing such insightful information, such interesting and honest information. I really appreciate it, and I know that everyone else does. They appreciate it the same.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you to our panelists. Great discussion. At this time, I know we've been talking about Eutelmed. What on earth is Eutelmed? How does it look? And we took that into consideration. So before we close off today's webinar, we've asked Anik, who is a clinical psychologist and also the project coordinator for Eutelmed, to actually show us how to access the services and how to go about using the interface.
Thank you. And thank you for the sharing. It was really, it's important and so honest. So, and I'm glad we all agree that mental health is really important and we can take care of it. So to go to Eutelmed, there is this address, caring.eutelmed.com. So you type, okay, mine is already there, .com. Then you will be on this page. They ask you a code. The code is UNICEF ECA, but we can write it also on the chat. Then come to this page. You have, is it in English? You have a self-assessment center. This self-assessment center is a place you can come when you don't know if you're stressed or not, if you're anxious, if you sleep well, or you don't know, you just want to check before you talk to someone. So you can, for example, choose this one is to see if you are anxious a little bit more than usual. So you fill up the questionnaire, not opening. And at the end, if your scores are high, you will be asked if you want to talk with the psychologist or not. So you can say, yes, I want to talk to someone now or later on. Then you just give a time when someone can call you. And this is something you can do as much as you want, as often as you want. You can check now and then let some days go and check again and see if the scores are similar or not. Then you have the awareness page. It's to read articles. So here you choose your language. You have articles or webinars in English, French, Spanish, or even more language, but choose English, like quitting smoking. You have a guide here if you want to know a little bit more about it. Identify the signs. This goes with the anxiety, for example, or stress. Bipolar, there are many. You can choose, or this is an article from Quamina, this one. So you see, it's an article that we wrote on International Suicide Awareness Day. So there are many more. So you can just go there and look for information. And the space is this one. It's 24/7 helpline. As Trey say, you never know when it hits you. So you can, for example, just choose to go here to chat, choose your language, and then write that you're not feeling well. You don't have to say who you are, where you live. We may ask you for our statistics, but anything that's personal, you don't have to say it. It's only when you need an appointment with a psychologist that then we'll ask you a name, your birth of date, because we need to tell the psychologist you're meeting with this person. But on this helpline, it's anonymous. You can write in the morning, you can write in the afternoon, you can even just say, look, I'm not feeling well. Can someone call me? And we will call you if you don't want to call. And there is this place too. So I don't think there is a toll-free number on the Caribbean. Then you come here, you just type your phone number and press call me on this number. And normally,
And it's in the dashboard.
do you see it? Normally we call you right away. We'll call back as soon as we get the message. And the other part is the consultation center. Where you have to fill up a profile to be able to get an appointment with a psychologist. I would advise to go through the helpline so the psychologist can guide you, because sometimes something you can just sort out with the helpline psychologist. Sometimes it's something more important, then you need a specialized psychologist, and we know who we can refer you to. So I don't know if this was clear or if I have to repeat something.
So we have one question. Where are the Eutelmed psychologists based?
Oh, they based actually all over the world. We work online. So we have, for example, Quamina, she's now in Barbados. And if I don't know if I'm wrong. Myself, I'm now in France, but I live in Georgia, Caucasus. We are all over the world.
I'm in Trinidad and Tobago.
Oh yeah, sorry. Eutelmed is a French-based company, but with over 400 psychologists and coaches that are in Australia, in UK, USA. So it's when you ask for an appointment, for example, we may refer you to someone who is in the same time. I don't know how you call it.
Time zone?
Time zone than you. And if you have someone in Malaysia, then we try to find someone who's in this time zone. So that's why I'm advising to go through the helpline when needing an appointment, so we can really advise on who may be the best match. If it's an addiction, it's better to be maybe with someone who's more familiar with the addiction. If it's an adolescent, we will see how to make the best match. If you're not happy with the psychologist you're seeing, we can also go to the helpline to see how we can sort things out.
We have another question. What is the cost to see a psychologist?
The project is funded by UNICEF. So people using it don't have to pay anything. If someone is asking you to pay something, then you're not on the right platform. In this one, no one should ask you to pay anything.
So it is free. So we provided the website link in the chat, caring.eutelmed.com, and the access code, which is UNICEF-ECA. So it is absolutely free. I know we had Donnell, did you have your hand up? And Camille as well?
It was a question I was bringing up in the question chat. It says, apart from stigma and cost, can you identify any other barriers to seeking mental health care?
I'm not sure if any of the practitioners, so maybe Annick or Camille, can answer that question.
I actually had my hand up to answer a question I saw here. I mean, I'll try and answer that question also, but I was going to answer any limitations to the service online.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think that's a fair question. I would say for my therapeutic purpose or for therapy in general, the only limitation to a virtual setting is a part of what a psychologist will do is observe you. So, for example, people do a lot of unconscious things that contribute or can indicate what it is going on in their head. So you may shake your leg a lot, which may indicate you're in a nervous place, etc., etc. So there is a limitation to me being able to observe you in your full, presence and all of the fidgets and little things that a person may do. For example, if something is tough, a person may shrug, and so it becomes a little difficult to see that part of the interaction. But I don't think that has ever hampered my process using the virtual. I think I'm still able to help people. People express to me that, they feel as though there's a shift happening. So I would say that is realistically something that gets hampered. But does it have much of an impact on the process? I would say not really, because there are lots of other factors that would indicate the same thing in the moment also. And sorry, the question that Donna was alluding to, can you just remind me, Chelsea, which one was it? Oh, any other barriers to seeking mental health care? I mean, there can be tons of barriers, even just, there can be cultural, regional barriers, there can be even individual barriers, such as, is your family supportive of it? You can sometimes, so many different types of barriers. For example, if you are a part of a particular religion in your family, it may look at that religion may have certain structures or rules that make certain things that would be mentally, important. It can put it in a different light and make that acceptable. And so, I mean, that can be a barrier to accessing mental health, aside from finances and just the stigma in general, just the general ability. So, for example, in rural settings, it can be difficult to access because of lack of Wi-Fi coverage, lack of transportation, especially in our region. These are the kind of issues we tend to have in island to island. So I think that those can also affect and be difficult to overcome also.
Just to add to your point, I think that our knowledge on mental health can be a barrier as well. Because, for example, if you're not in our mood or something, that's what we'll say. We'll just automatically say, we're not in our mood, or we're sad, we're not feeling like ourselves. So because of our lack of knowledge on mental health, we will not think of going to see a psychiatrist or going to seek the help that we need.
Thanks, Donnell. And just in the interest of time, I know we are 5 minutes past the original deadline, but one question I see was, Maybe Anik, you can answer that. Are there any therapists on Eutelmed from the Leeward Islands? So maybe other persons from the Caribbean, because someone else asked, is this only for youth in the Caribbean?
No, we have no therapist from Rhode Island, but would be happy to have one. So please apply. And I wanted to say, I saw a question saying that the culture, being culturally aware is a helpful factor in the therapeutic setting. I totally agree, but I want to add something. Pain is universal. Comfort is universal too. Once this is done, then we can see what's cultural, what not, what we can help with. The thing is just not to stay with your pain. From there, you can continue with someone who's culturally close, but I do believe that comfort is really universal. The other question I saw, is this for only Eastern Caribbean youth? No, it's for everyone. It's for families. The thing is that if you are under 16, we will ask if your parents agree. We will ask if it is a consultation with the psychologist, that one parent is at least present for the first meeting. But for the chat, for the call, you can still ask questions. Now, sometimes we get messages with youth, mostly, with suicidal thoughts, and we will ask you to help us to help you. So sometimes we need your number, we need your name, and we need to be able to contact someone or to help you tell someone. So if we ask for personal information, is that we're worried, but normally we tell you. The confidentiality has a limit. Sometimes we need maybe to reach out with someone, mostly for the young people when we feel like they may harm themselves.
Thank you, Anik. And I see Heather, just to close off. Heather, you have a question or comment?
Yes, no, thank you very much. Very informative. I just wanted to respond to a question that Alyssa is asking, whether it's for Caribbean nationals who are Francophone, Spanish, Dutch, etc. This cooperation was primarily for the Eastern Caribbean, meaning those countries in the OECS, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Turks and Caicos Islands, the countries covered by this particular UNICEF office. However, anyone who tunes in with the code, the service will be available to them. And the service is multilingual, so yes, it can cover those nationals who speak French, Spanish, or Dutch. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. So I don't believe we have any more questions. We have, I just want to remind everybody that the main things takeaways from today's conversation, at least for Eutelmed, is it is totally free. It is accessible to anyone and everyone. And they have an additional amenity, which is the 24/7 hotline. So thank you so much, Anik, for that comprehensive overview of the program. I want to thank the panelists for suggesting ways to move forward with mental health on a policy level, community, and institutional level. And of course, at the beginning, we mentioned that Girls of a Feather is now partnering with Eutelmed and UNICEF, and we have transferred two of our counselors from St. Lucia. That is Mrs. Suyen Hackshaw. She is a crisis counselor and works with survivors of abuse, and Ms. Francisca Plummer, who is a psychotherapist. So you can actually visit girlsofafeather.org/telehealth if you would like to book consultations with them, and they will be on Eutelmed as well. So again, you can access the services using UNICEF's code, which is UNICEF-ECA, and you can access everything that they have on their website for free. So I want to thank everyone again for joining us, and do have a wonderful afternoon and happy International Youth Day. So take care and enjoy the rest of the day, everyone.